Hi Gary, how are you?
Good, thanks, Leo. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. Gary, you've put this article together for us regarding debt. It's been quite clear in the news recently that the government debt's tipped over the 2 trillion mark. I wondered if you could put that into context for us, and at the same time, we received a question from a client. With all this borrowing, when we're borrowing such vast sums of money, who actually does the lending? Where does this money come from?
Oh, that's a really interesting point. First of all, let's deal with the debt in context. You can track back on, it's not the amount of the debt. It is in any circumstances. It's whether the borrower can service the debt. So, my first mortgage was £20,000. I can tell you that in 1981 it seemed like a fortune. Today it's a drop in the ocean. Your credit cards come with a 20k credit limit, so it's relative to income. So if we put the government borrowing into the context of our country's income, which is measured in gross domestic product, i.e. it's the amount of all the services and goods that we produce, then that 2 trillion has just gone back to the long-term average. In other words, it's just got back up to the long-term average of about 95% of GDP. So we, for quite a few years now, have had borrowing way below its long-term average. And that 95% is still significantly less than the north of 200% that the country's debt to GDP was when World War II finished in 1945-46. So it's not a necessarily a big sum by historic standards.
Mm-hmm. So in that I'm hearing don't be alarmed. The media likes to make a big song and a dance about these things. People don't really know how to put such vast figures into context. Leo, where do we go from this?
Well, yeah, Leo, the point you made, yes, don't be alarmed. If we're going to be alarmed about anything, we should be alarmed that the government doesn't borrow enough. And that is a crime as much as over-borrowing is. And I've said for ages, you can tell whether money is plentiful or not by the rate of interest. And when you've got too many people chasing too little money, then interest rates go through the roof. But when you've got too few people chasing too much money, money has to be sold at knockdown prices, which means interest rates are low. And our interest rates are the lowest they've been for 700 years. And just as an aside, I had a question on that last time as to where did we get the UK borrowing figures from back in the 13th century. And the answer is the study was taken from the leading economy of the time. So it could be Holland, it could be Germany, it could be Venice, but that's how we did it. But the key takeaway is that these are the lowest interest rates we have ever experienced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So where would you hope to see this go then, Gary?
Well, I hope that Rishi Sunak keeps his foot on the gas and keeps spending the money. I hope we get our infrastructure being repaired and built, because that is what earns the country revenue and makes our lives better in the long term. And if you look at the article, anybody reading that article will see that in fact total government debt added to total private borrowing comes to around £145,000 per household, whereas the average assets of each household are £450,000, and that excludes what we own collectively in state assets. This country is very well off. What we need to do is ditch austerity and get on with a bit of spending. And hopefully that's one of the positive things that will come from COVID-19, that we'll get back to spending on things that we need to do.
Sure. And just finally, Gary, and sorry if I missed the point, but the government can borrow all this money. Who's lending it? Where's it coming from?
See, you've got back to the question that you wanted to answer and I was trying not to answer. So it's an interesting one. There's some good stuff out at the moment from a group of economists that are are promoting MMT, which is modern monetary theory. And what they explain is that, in fact, if your government has sovereignty of it over its own currency, which we do because our government issues the pound, just like the Japanese government issues the yen and the American government issues dollars, then the money doesn't actually have to be borrowed from anywhere. It can be literally printed. You can conjure that money up. It's just creating currency. So it's no real difficulty for the government to pay for the projects it gets involved with. You know, the furlough scheme that the Chancellor introduced, the money literally can be conjured up. And if you think about it, any time this country's ever needed money, it finds it. The issue is more that if you have all of the resources of the country fully at work and demand exceeds those resources, which is what happens if the government prints too much money and engages in too much spending, then you get inflation. But anybody tracking the inflation rate will see at the moment that we are nowhere near inflation taking off, although we forecast and we expect it to start to tick upwards in the next 18 months, which is why we're worried about bond prices.
Gary, thank you for the context. As ever, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please let us know. We'll share them with the right people and we'll put some answers together for you. Gary, for now, thank you.
Thanks, Leo. Thank you.
Take care.